Welcome to SFL This Week. Alongside Chris Curtis, I'm Cameron Irvine. We are here to break down the end of the regular season, get you ready for the playoffs. We just got dates and times into our inbox, so we're going to be previewing those games at the end of the show. But for now, it's back to Week 14. How you doing, Curtis?
I'm doing pretty good. Excited to see how everything shook out for the weekend and tell the story of what was an amazing weekend of playoff anticipatory matchups, all the scenarios, and finally the one that took hold.
We know that it's hard to watch 11 games in a weekend, and that's why this show exists, to try and keep you up to date on everything that happened. Let's take a look at the headlines from Week 14. The Vancouver Legion are back on top. 2 straight narrow wins to end the season helps secure the Pacific Division, the 7 seed, and a home playoff game. The Minnesota Legend, second half, flexing, rumbled away from Charleston, scored 27 unanswered, and clinched the 3 seed. Dominance from Florida on Monday night. Boy, it was ugly. They roll over Carolina on the final night of the regular season, and they await their next opponent. Atlanta, well, they did it a different way. They had a bye, and they got in anyway after that big 49-7 win over Charleston a couple of weeks ago, and the bye makes Atlanta playoff bound, and the Alamo City Artillery, they are not done yet. They top LA, they get that 12 seed. Now they've got rival Florida in front of them, and then potentially Canton after that. If they upset the Florida Storm, what caught your eye? If they upset the Fort Worth Toros, what caught your eye in Week 14?
The 2 surprises, Minnesota, who, no one really gave a realistic shot coming into the season. They come out getting a bye in the first round, and that's a big achievement for that Legend franchise. And then Atlanta, who had a bit of a down season last season, wasn't quite able to get into the playoff picture, do enough to get in this season and an upward moving trajectory for the Swarm.
I think for me it was Minnesota kind of putting themselves in that upper echelon of teams. They had their troubles with Charleston early, but man, this team has been killing teams over the last month of the season. So yeah, it's going to be an interesting ride down the stretch. Apparently, I'm in spooky lighting. The lighting was a little bit under your chin. You looked like you're about to tell a campfire story. Not gonna lie. That's not any better. We don't have games going on. It's all jacked up. It's all jacked up around here.
It's the mic that's creating the shadow. It's kind of like you're putting your face in the flashlight.
Well, whatever. How about that? Ooh, I'll tell a scary story. Ooh, 38% completion percentage. Ooh. Yeah, we're going to fix that in season 23. All right, let's get to the highlights. In Week 14, we start with Fort Worth and Baltimore because that game meant a lot to both teams, and T. Roy Gaines rumbling and stumbling to start the show for Baltimore, up 3-0 on Fort Worth, and they would extend it. Ivory Irvin, T. Roy Gaines, is there a better 1-2 punch in the SFL? These two are superstars.
They really are, and they have been for quite a while in the Baltimore red and black. It's been inevitable. Death taxes in Baltimore finding a 1-2 combination in the end zone.
And there's Gaines getting his touchdown, so 17-0. Baltimore takes the lead over the Toros. Fort Worth would have to get it going. They were trying to get a bye, but unfortunately wouldn't have the opportunity. But Cade Stevens still playing hard down the field to start the second half as the Toros look for a touchdown and to try to cut into the deficit. But they'd only get a field goal, so Wigmore would get back to work, but he's picked off, Curtis, by Ben Stone, and that began Fort Worth charge.
Yeah, they were really charging hard, trying to come back, get that bye like you were alluding to, but the Toros need more of this, not just in this game, but also just in the playoff picture in general. They need to make a solid run, all 3 phases of the game on the same page at the same time, including the running and passing game. More Cade Stevens, please.
At this point, it felt like the Fort Worth Toros had the makings of a comeback. A 51-yard interception return. Jack Wigmore saves the touchdown, but Fort Worth at some point is going to need to get in the end zone. Minnesota struggled with that against Baltimore earlier this season as well. So 8.5 minutes to go in the fourth quarter. It's just a 2-score game. It's 3rd and inches. Steven Hacker pretty quiet on the night. Baltimore's playing zone coverage, trying to keep him out of the end zone, but they forgot about this man, Marcus Dunhill. Look at the creativity on that play call. The quarterback draw on 3rd and goal makes it 17-10, but down to stretch Curtis. Troy LaShaw and this Baltimore Vulture defense continues to play well. They top Fort Worth 20-10.
Yeah, that was Baltimore forcing Fort Worth to be a one-dimensional team. If you force them to throw the ball and you play good coverage on them, you will be able to exploit some opportunities. Baltimore was able to do that against Marcus Dunhill and really put that game away at pretty much at ease.
Sultan LSCG with the $5 super chat says Cam needs to grow a voluptuous goatee and grow his locks out. Hashtag Manscaped. Okay, I can't be like Curtis, who can grow a thick beard. Basically, when you look at my face, the hairier it is, the more tired I am of life. So there you go. That's where we're at in week 14. I wish the $5 could do more for me, but it's going to take a whole lot more money than that. Some sort of, I don't know.
Buy you some beard cream.
Some what?
Some beard cream.
Beard cream?
Yep.
Is that a euphemism?
No, that is not a euphemism. That's an actual thing.
I'm not touching that. Back to the highlights. Indianapolis and San Diego. Rob Noel gets things started for the Mavericks. They needed a win to stay alive in the playoff picture. Up 7-0 in the first. It was all San Diego early. RC Puff with the sack. Who's your daddy? 3rd down and 10 now as Pickler drops to throw and fires to B. Robo, and right before the goal line, Robo is stuffed, so San Diego would have to settle for a field goal. 10-0 finally. Indianapolis gets some offense going. Ryan Roosevelt to the end zone late in the 3rd quarter to tie the game at 10 as San Diego tries to fight back, but Rob Noel is stuffed. Adam Wiseman dropped in the backfield. That forces San Diego into a field goal with just over 2 minutes to go. So one final chance for Indianapolis. Colin Pierce is picked off by Tom Krieg, and Krieg is not going to have anyone come close to him. Those big guys, no way they're catching him. 20-10, San Diego wins the game, but they miss out on the playoffs, just did not have the resume to get in. They've been in that position before, Curtis, when they were 7-5 and didn't get in because of a strength of victory defeat. So San Diego does not make the playoffs. They announced earlier this week they're suspending operations. Adam Wiseman, who made a tackle for loss, announced that he was leaving the Indianapolis ownership group, but the Ramblers are just fine as Chad Rowland assumes sole ownership. We saw the Pittsburgh Riverhogs get promoted up into the league. There were a lot of ownership changes this week. There's a lot going on at the top of this league, Curtis, but most importantly, the league is trying to stabilize maybe the mentality and attitude up at the top of the league so that everyone has a fun place to play, and people that want to be here, and I know that Nashville, Albuquerque, Pittsburgh, and others, the newcomers, they are hungry to compete. And what do you think about all the changes that we've seen over the past few weeks?
I mean, it speaks to the league strength that we do have teams waiting in the wings to come up and take those spots. I mean, yeah, they're going to be essentially running 2 rosters, one for SFL and one for the top league, but at the same point, that speaks to their competitiveness and their fire to be in that position. And then hopefully those teams like San Diego, who are suspending operations, hopefully it's not permanent suspension. Hopefully they're able to put everything back together and come back into the fold at some point. But it's as long as the wheel keeps turning, there's going to be teams and people that are competitive, that have the fire, that have the passion to be here, and the SFL wants to have a place for those people to be.
We'll have information on the dispersal draft and some other minor league dates coming up as that season kicks off Friday, May 10th. Okay, back to the highlights. DC Dragons trying to clinch a first-round bye, and it wasn't going so hot early on. After a Lauren Prococo touchdown, James Matthew Jr. strikes back 10-7 Queen City, now up 13-7 over the Dragons, but Shabazz Synergy to Mason Kirby. This guy, there's no way he's not in the Hall of Fame at some point. This guy just keeps making play after play, no matter what team he's on.
Yeah, every single team he's been on, he's made an impact. From the Vegas days to the Dallas Lobo days, he has been an impact player everywhere, and would love to see him continue to succeed.
Adrian Ellis, man, that was dangerous and trying to protect the football. Queen City's down 20-13. They're in this thing. 3 minutes to go. James Matthew gets inside the red zone, but the drive would stall out. And on fourth down, miscommunication from Eric Price to Bob Wood, and the DC Dragons get the win 20-13. So they lock up a first-round bye. They keep Fort Worth out of it. Hey, how about Minnesota? We talked about how they got it going in the second half, but what about the first half? Ian Francis, Charleston, opening kickoff, out of here. Touchdown, Charleston. That's the way you start a game.
Yeah, absolutely. And Minnesota shows in this one that they have the way to come back from that, but that's a huge blow to them early. And Charleston trying to keep their hopes alive, really playing hard on all three phases at that point.
And Adam Knoll with a brilliant interception there. He gets up, gets a big return out of it. He's only slowed down by the sideline as Charleston's up 10-0. But on back-to-back offensive possessions, Charleston only managed to get a field goal. That kept the game close. And then Colin Hart gets in the end zone, now 13-7. John Lakeman is trying to get the offense moving. Cody Griffin with the pick gives Minnesota a short field, now down just 3. And then just before the half, it's Johnny Reno to Jay Taylor, wide open. And this is when the wheels kind of started to fall off for Charleston, but one last gasp for the Predators. They're down 20-13 with just a minute to go in this one. The Minnesota Legend fans have had plenty to cheer about here down the stretch of this 3-game homestand, but not before the half, because Lakeman gets his team down the field in 33 seconds, scores and ties the game 20-20. But we weren't done in the first half, because Minnesota, with 33 seconds on the clock, gets the team all the way into field goal range with in 25 seconds, and then able to kick the field goal. So Minnesota takes that momentum away from Charleston at the end of the first half, and then it was all Legend in the second half. Isaac knocks into the end zone here, 30-20.
I don't know what they said to Minnesota, what the coaching staff said to them at halftime, but it was a complete change in attitude, in execution, and Charleston was really no match for what Minnesota brought to the table in that second half. Really, really fun to see when they are dominating a team, just how skillful they can be.
Max Knight with the sack, and then T to Queen, little creativity out of the backfield, catching the touchdown, and then Stephen Black with the interception. Yeah, it was all Minnesota from there as the Legend cruise against the Charleston Predators. So Minnesota, DC, they take care of business. They both get to 10 wins. The Minnesota Legend will be in a unique position. They'll have a first-round bye, and they've never won a playoff game. So when they get into that quarterfinal, they're going to be playing for their first playoff win. That quarterfinal is going to be spicy, because someone's going to want to take that away from them.
Yeah, you're right. And you talk about a team that has a lot to prove. I mean, you talk about Minnesota and really DC as well.
Yeah.
Both of those teams absolutely have something to prove, that they can play in the second season, essentially in the postseason. Minnesota in a position where youth versus experience, I guess, for them, where they go into a quarterfinal matchup. They don't know yet who they're going to play, but they have to prepare and get the nerves out of the way somehow. Continue to work on what works for you, regardless of who comes in. It should be a pressure cooker for them in that spot. Being at home, they want to avoid as much disappointment as possible. DC, on the other hand, they've been around for a long time. They're still trying to find success in that offseason, and they have playoff wins. So it should be a lot of fun to see where the veterans in the league are going to end up when this playoffs are set in as well.
Devon Simeon asking if there's a playoff tree available to see. There's not a playoff tree yet, because we reseed after the wild card round, and then once we reseed, then we'll have a bracket of 8 teams remaining. So be on the lookout for that. We'll be previewing the matchups in the wild card round coming up at the end of the show. I wanted to go back to DC a little bit because this is a team that, yes, they won a championship in season 5, but it's been a really long time. They haven't won one since they returned. Stephen Mullinex has never won a title, and he's a big part of that team over there. James Walters is part of the Nashville ownership group, so this is his last opportunity to win in a DC Dragon uniform. So there's a lot of guys at the top of that team that are really motivated to get a win, make a playoff push. And remember, they were down 17-6 to Canton. They had 3rd and goal on the 1-yard line. They may have been, outside of Florida, the closest team to beating the Canton Classics this season. So, and that rematch is potentially looming if we get into a 4-1 situation, right? And there aren't a lot of quarterfinal and wild card upsets. So we could see that. And then Minnesota didn't play Florida or Canton. So it's really going to be interesting to see how the Legend take on the top teams in the league, because they look like they're right up there as well. So that was kind of how the top 4 played out. Fort Worth lost. It wouldn't have mattered anyway in the end. They were locked into the 5 seed. That's how they got Alamo City at the 12. So we move on to the Pacific Division and how that was all won. This game was wild. Probably the best game you didn't see this weekend. Baloo Scott stepping over a defender on her way into the end zone made it 7-0. And then Ezekiel Love fumbles. It's picked up off a kneecap of a Portland Fleet player, and Frosty goes all the way into the end zone for a touchdown.
Yeah, a little pickup 6 on the kneecap of the Portland player, and if there's any way for Seattle to get in, make a play early, and just kind of silence the doubters, that's one way to do it. And Portland just, they tried.
Comeback route for John Fullerton, and then I don't know what Cyrus Jive was looking at, threw it right to the defender. 24-3 at this point. All is lost for Portland, right? Well, this might be the craziest play of the season, because that's a fumble, and then that's picked up by Terrell Cooper, and then there's nobody there. Portland touchdown. Are you kidding me? 24-10, just like that. Portland's in this game. With 6:20 to go in the fourth, they're in field goal range, and Scott Johnson fumbles the football. 2 fumbles by 2 running backs lost in the same game. That's a pretty rare occurrence in the SFL. Seattle puts it away. Baloo Scott back in the end zone. They win 31-10. Man, great effort by Portland there. Was making Seattle sweat for about 20 minutes of real-time action. But Seattle got the win. And look, they are the definition, Curtis, of a wild card. They get Baltimore in the first round. It's not the best matchup for them. They got crushed by the Vultures, but albeit early on in the season. But you never know with Seattle. That sometimes they just come out and they just look unstoppable.
Wild card is the best way to really define them, and Jekyll and Hyde would be another one for me. I like the potential of what Seattle does when things are going fantastic, and things when they're not going as fantastic really have a chance to snowball. So which version of Seattle are we going to see? Are we going to see the dominant one that takes out Portland fairly easily, or are we going to see one that rolls over to Baltimore? The nice part about seeing Baltimore twice in one season is you've already seen them once. You can prepare based off of that and try to counter. So we shall see. But you're right. Seattle has a chance to upset some people. No doubt about that in the playoff picture.
Ty Pataki was even throwing a stiff arm at some point during that game. Like, man, the dude has no chill. So Seattle took care of business. They would need a Vancouver loss to potentially win the Pacific at a home playoff game. Or Vancouver could take care of business against Mexico City. And this is how it turned out. Early on, it was Aztecs. Liam Ryan, pick 6 off of Christian Brown. Ryan to his house makes it 7-3 Mexico City. They would need a win to stay alive in the playoffs. A loss would eliminate them, but Vancouver strikes right back. Christian Brown finds Brett Killian, and the Gerard Brody gets all kinds of turned around. Touchdown for BK12, and Vancouver's up 10-7 late in the first quarter. Legion back on offense in the red zone. Christian Brown looking around. Look at the strong protection, wide open. Nick Lockett, you can't ask defenders to cover that long.
No, you can't. And Nick Lockett, that had to feel special for him doing it against his former team. And Mexico City did make it interesting, though.
Devontae Richardson into the end zone. Hashtag throw to the tight end. 17-17, 3:55 to go in the third. At this point, it's 20-17. Vancouver's up 3, third down. And sacked by Dan Tritz. That would hold Vancouver to a field goal and give Mexico City a couple of opportunities at winning in the red zone. Down 6. Jordan Sipe to the 5-yard line. Pass hauled in by Jason Bartley. 3 minutes and counting. Mexico City knocking on the door. Touchdown and extra point gives them the lead. First and goal at the 4. Pass intercepted. Drew Hamilton in the end zone. The flag was for a face mask on Terrazas. But look, 6 seconds left. Mexico City's back in the red zone again with a chance to win the game. And it's another sack. Marcus Reed with the takedown. Mexico City out of timeouts. And the clock runs out on the Aztecs in the Aztec season. Curtis, 6-6, 6 one-score losses. The Aztecs, in my view, are definitely the best team that didn't make the playoffs. Just couldn't win the close ones when they needed it.
Yeah, hard to argue. One bounce one way or the other in a couple of those games, and they're probably in the playoffs, and they may very well be looking at a bye at that point. So it's a team that has matured. They've developed quite a bit. Their coaching changes to put Mike Daggs in charge of a lot of the playbook scheme has really paid dividends for them, and will continue to pay dividends, because the thing about one-score games is it's going to even out. The averages may go one way one season, and then maybe season 23 comes out and they're 6-0 in those one-score games. So it really is gonna depend, and it's gonna be a lot of fun to see where they go and what they can do a season from now.
Yeah, the law of averages says that they're going to start winning those games eventually, and then that 6-6 season is going to turn into a 9-3. We're going to be talking about the resurgence of the Aztecs again, right at the top of the stand.
Aztec Empire.
Yeah, they're so close. They're just right there. Hopefully, they can keep that team together and continue that forward momentum, because that was a heck of a strong season by Mexico City. But Vancouver wins the Pacific. They take it away from Seattle after Seattle had a one-season stint with it, and they they reassert their dominance a little bit over this division, and just kudos to Vancouver for not losing their cool. I mean, this team was 5-6? No, 5-5 heading into the final 2 weeks of the season, and they potentially could have missed the playoffs for the first time ever, right?
Yeah.
And they didn't do that. They beat Seattle close. They beat Mexico City close. They got it done. They got the wins.
Yeah, you're right. And talk about an up and down season for Vancouver, especially with the changes roster-wise from one season to the next. There was a lot of them. And kudos to Andy Hamilton, kind of letting back on the reins a little bit, letting some of his staff do some work instead of everything falling on his shoulders. It ended up with them in a playoff spot. So, I mean, it can't be all bad going on there north of the border, and looking forward to seeing what a season together, an off-season together, means for them come season 23.
And they're looking to get back to the playoff winning ways as well, because last year they got smoked by Canton in that wild card game. And so, Vancouver's going to be looking to take care of business at home against the Tulsa Desperados and Gabriel Manning, potential MVP candidate, all that good stuff. That should be an exciting game. All right, so we've got a couple games left to get to. Alamo City, they needed a win to keep their playoff hopes alive, and at the start of the night, the playoffs looked pretty slim as Rain Storm gets in the end zone. Alamo City's up 14-7, but Los Angeles would not go away quietly. Jalen Wells with a touchdown, 14-14. At this point, some of Alamo City's leadership was saying GG's in the chat because Ace Fennick got hurt. But hey, when you got Vin Calia and the rest of these weapons, you can never count those guys out. Alamo City goes up 21-14 late in the third quarter, and they really never look back.
Yeah, you're right. Patrick Ramsey comes in, the Alamo City quarterback, who didn't have a stellar day, but he made the passes matter when he actually was able to complete them in the second half. As Ace Fennick went down, you have to have somebody step up, and they were able to do that. The playmakers around him are what made that happen. Alamo City survives, I think, but really they looked like an all-around team in that game. And with Ace Fennick back in the fold, if all three phases are clicking, then this team could potentially foster an upset.
And Brad Jones gets it done at the end there to get the win 28-14. I was surprised when the game was tied. You're playing a team, Los Angeles has struggled this season. We all know their woes, although they played better over the last month and a half, the back half of the season. But I was just so surprised that Alamo City's, saying GG's. I mean, we've seen just last week a backup quarterback beat them, Larry Love. They won that game in San Antonio 13-3. I mean, he didn't light it up, but he did enough to to get Mexico City the win. So that was kind of shocking. I just have to get that out of the way because I'm calling their game this next week. So we gotta get the shock value out on that one. But that was a little surprising. You'd like to see a little bit more faith in that. But I bet they got a little bit more faith now because they're in the playoffs.
Yeah, they do. They should, and they warrant it. I mean, Alamo City is a team that can beat any team on any given day. And they've shown that on numerous occasions. So especially the last second thriller we had a few weeks ago. Excited to see how they do in a scenario where they go up against a Fort Worth team that really themselves have a lot to prove.
And they're a very similar team to Mexico City in the fact that they lost a lot of close games this season, by 1 point at times, 2 points. And it's just crazy how it works out, Curtis, because Mexico City just 2 weeks ago beat Alamo City. And so you're thinking, well, it should be the Aztecs in the playoffs, but there were so many teams. You saw in the scenario show 6 and 6 teams. The only way to really look at everybody collectively was from a resume standpoint. And Alamo City's was slightly better than Mexico City's, and sometimes it's just that close. We had some wild scenarios, Curtis, on that show where it was like coming down to strength of schedule, like twice to determine who was going to make the cut line. That didn't end up happening. The favorites took care of business, and we didn't have as much drama as we may have thought on the last 2 nights of the season. But kudos to Alamo City for getting in, making another playoff trip, and that Alamo City Fort Worth game is going to be great. Those previews are coming up here shortly. Final highlight of the week, well, Tulsa could get in with a win, but that didn't happen. Instead, we saw maybe the future Denver Nightwings. This was a coming out party. They were 3-8, down in the dumps. Florida shut them out a couple weeks ago. Jeremy Mosley right off the bat gets things going. Then it's Ace Ketchum from 27 yards out, and number 27 scores. That's his longest run of the season. Look at him go. I mean, this was just a crazy game. No one expected. As Gene Struthers on 3rd down and goal, that's a touchdown, and Mosley in the back of the end zone. It's 14-0.
Yeah, and Tulsa really at this point needed to wake up. They needed to realize that their playoff lives were on the line. They had a major improvement season over season trying to figure it out. And then Denver just kind of caught them by surprise, and they just could not recover. Just problem after problem for Tulsa on this night.
Whoa, did you see that?
Wow.
That was a defensive lineman with the deflection, and then Joseph Saboka with the interception. Can we get a call of this, please?
Just get shut down. Brown to throw, under pressure, breaks the sack, but then it's batted down. Are you kidding me right now? He's going the other way and gets all the way down to the 5. That's how a team plays defense, folks.
Mike Daggs, Gerald Smith with a beautiful call there on the Saboka interception. 17-0, 2nd and goal, Denver. Tulsa on the cusp of the playoffs, playing some of their best football in franchise history, and Denver is just rolling. Bailey O'Shaughnessy, 24-0. This was the most bonkers game of the weekend, Kurt. I mean, it was stunning to watch as finally DJ Bandit gets Tulsa in the end zone. They stop the bleeding.
Yeah, and at this point, you get in the end zone, you think, well, maybe, Tulsa has the gumption to make a run of it in the second half, but just nothing really came of that.
Gabriel Manning trying his best. I mean, he was being double teamed all day long. Finally gets a catch to fall. 2nd down and goal. This one to Deion James. So, hey, don't look now. 24-14. Denver's having a hard time putting this thing away, but a great punt got him down to the 1 yard line, and then that pass goes right to Jeff Melanisham. 1:50 to go in the 4th quarter. That's it. It's over. Tulsa dug themselves too deep of a hole, and they lose the ball game by a couple scores, few scores. They still get in the playoffs, though. Now they got to play Houston as Vancouver as the 10 seed. So that's your 10-7 matchup. Tulsa's got to be feeling a little confused or bamboozled, but maybe, just maybe, Curtis, this was about Denver and some forward momentum they're getting as an organization. Jeremy Vega has said that, he's back coaching. He's analyzing the game. It seems like the team is maybe a little rejuvenated. They're a very young team, They got a lot of boosts from some rule changes that will take an effect in season 23 in terms of progression and salaries and all that stuff. So I think Denver may be on the rise here. Curtis, what do you think?
I think that is a nice look into the future, and I think you're right about this game. I think it was more about what Denver did rather than what Tulsa didn't do, and really Denver played a game that they needed to take advantage of their strengths. So good stuff on the game, but you're right. A future look into what Denver looks like potentially for season 23 and beyond. The Gene Struthers and company in Denver are made stronger by the fact that Vega is back in the fold, and a successful Denver Nightwings team, all told, is good for the SFL. So I'm really excited as to the potential of that team and what that means for that division as well.
And hey, 4-8's not so bad in a season where 4 teams finished 2-10.
Yeah,
you're not feeling too bad about yourself at 4-8. So great win for Denver. Tulsa's going to have to shake it off. Otherwise, they're going to be one and done. Now they got to go on the road to try and get a big upset against a very tough and competitive Vancouver team. All right, so we've got our dates and times here that just came through before the show started. So here we go. We're going to start with the game Saturday, April 20th. 6:30 p.m. Eastern. Charles Doherty and I will be on the call for that one, and that is Alamo City and Fort Worth, the 12-5 matchup in these playoffs. It's a South rivalry. These two, the last time these two teams have played, Curtis, it's been down to the wire. Incredible football, right? We saw it at the end of last season with that 2-point conversion stop, and then we saw it at the end of week 1 when Alamo City got their revenge. It's the only team in the playoffs that Alamo City has beaten. They won that game in week 1, Curtis. Without that win, they wouldn't be in the playoffs, right? Because that boosted their strength of victory. It helped their resume. So that game did wonders for Alamo City, and now they get them again. How do you see this game playing out? Any keys?
Honestly, this is one that at the 12-5 matchup has the potential to be one of the upsets of the wild card weekend. And Alamo City comes into Fort Worth. Fort Worth has something to prove. Alamo City, I don't think they're just a thankful to be here team. I think they have something to prove as well. But really, two teams, super competitive, South Division rivalry. These two teams are very familiar with each other and how each other likes to call plays. So it's going to come down to execution on both of these teams. And really, if Fort Worth throws better than 250 yards in this game and keeps the turnovers clean, they win by 2 scores. That's the key for them, is their pass game needs to be on point against Alamo City secondary, and it's going to be Stephen Hacker, it's going to be Cade Stevens. Both of them have to have decent days to make this work.
Marcus Dunhill's been kind of a Brett Favre this season. He's thrown a lot of touchdowns, but I mean some games he's just giving the ball away way too much, and that's been a struggle. I look at the other side, Brad Jones, he's got to be the guy. Alamo City has toyed and tinkered with, a number of different ways to get the ground game going. It's kind of been their Achilles heel all season. But when Brad Jones is running well, he is a difference maker. It feels different for this team. And also, too, Yale, Montana, Vincalia, first half of the season, they were owning people. I mean, they were killing it out there, and their numbers kind of dwindled in the back half of the season. Can they get that deep passing attack going? Between Calia and Montana and Hacker and Stevens and Minson, don't forget about E.J. Minson too. I mean, this game's got a bunch of high flyers and a bunch of big weapons. So that is what kicks our playoffs off. Alamo City, Fort Worth, 12-5. Saturday, 6:30 p.m. Eastern. Saturday at 9 p.m. Eastern, Cameron Duty, Rochelle Colston are headed to Vancouver. The Vancouver Legion will take on the Tulsa Desperados Saturday at 9 p.m. Eastern. This game has some more high flyers. Gabriel Manning, the best wide receiver in the league this season. You've got Hall of Famer Robert Redford. You've got BK12. You've got Michael Brown in the playoffs after, struggling to find his way in Motor City. I mean, and these two have some history as well. I think they may have met in the playoffs once before. I don't have my notes up, but yeah, you've got it. Tulsa, Vancouver. This game should be great as well.
This one should, yeah. There's potential on both sides here. A couple of keys for both sides. On Tulsa's side, Gabriel Manning needs to be the MVP. There's no doubt about that, but he also needs to have a supporting cast around him. Phoenix Jones back there. Michael Brown needs to be on his game as well, going into a hostile environment in Vancouver. And Vancouver's defense and their linebacking core, I'm talking about DJ Woods, who was a big key in that game against Mexico City. He needs to be the one to put a stop to anything within 10 yards, as well as get the running game going against Tulsa. If Vancouver controls the clock, they control this game, and Vancouver goes out with a fairly easy win. But the crazier this game gets, the more it favors Tulsa.
Yeah, I would agree with you. And I think that Tulsa's going to have to be really smart about this, because you know that Vancouver's going to go out. There's no way they're letting Gabriel Manning beat them in this game. Mm-hmm. They're going to look at all the film on all the teams that shut Gabriel Manning down at least somewhat this season, and they're going to say, okay, what do they do? We're going to do that, right? And so Tulsa's got to be able to get those other guys going, right? And DJ Hume and Sonzo Robinson and Phoenix Jones in the ground game, and they're really going to have to mix things up, you know. And you know what I'd do, Curtis? I would get Jones and James going out of the backfield on Manning's side, right? Because they're going to be going with him, clear everything out and dump it off to those guys. So we'll see if Tulsa can pull the big upset. They're I would say a less experienced team than Vancouver, who's got a ton of playoff experience, so they're a little up against it there. The Delta Dome is going to be rocking, but that's going to be a great game. All right, so that is Saturday's doubleheader. We move to Sunday at 6:30 p.m. Eastern. That is the 6-seeded Houston Headhunters against the 11-seeded Atlanta Swarm. Mark Lopez and Anthony Ellison will be on the call for that game. The Houston Headhunters tied their franchise record this season with 8 wins. They finished 8-4. Josh Slapp and GP Wells, outside of Canton's Logan Lee and Robert Johnson, definitely the most lethal 1-2 punch out of the backfield in this league. We've seen Tiberius Bovine really pick it up at tight end over the last few weeks. And, of course, we know of all their tremendous weapons. Their defense has been on point. They held Atlanta to 3 points in a matchup that we saw on the Monday Night Spectacular just a few weeks ago on NASA night. And so you wonder, what's the difference going to be? And maybe it favors Atlanta, the fact that this matchup was so recent and so fresh that maybe Atlanta's got on the mind, okay, here's what we need to do differently that we didn't do last time against Houston to get this win. What do you think about this?
I mean, having playoff rematches of games you saw in the regular season, that is a game of adjustments, and that's exactly what Atlanta has the chance to do here. As far as Houston is concerned, this is probably the quietest 8-4 team that is in the playoffs so far, because they've really flown under the radar for a lot of the SFL media for the entire season. That's not to say they're not good. They have a lot of weapons, and they can beat you in a lot of different ways. Dave Burr can be really pinpoint when he wants to be. GP Wells and Josh Slapp, you mentioned them, very lethal combination for the run game for Houston. And Atlanta's side, they have weapons themselves. They have a trio of wide receivers. They have a quarterback in Bryant Dynasty who's hungry. They have BDG Hollywood, who would love a chance to make an impact in a playoff game, the longtime SFL veteran. I see a game that is, I think a shootout favors Houston, but if Atlanta can shut Houston's offense down, then if this game has less than 30 points, then Atlanta should be the one that's the favorite.
Houston seems to get frustrated when their offense isn't going well, right?
Correct.
When their offense isn't going well, the defense kind of feels a little unsure of themselves, and maybe there starts to be some cracks in the armor there. When that offense is humming, it just seems like everybody feeds off that. And so if I'm Atlanta, that's my number one priority. I gotta stop them. I gotta keep this game close. I want to play this maybe a little bit more defensive, a little bit more low scoring, because Houston just wants to go out there and light it up. So we'll see how many adjustments Atlanta can make, because that matchup was pretty recent. So that's going to be an interesting look at in the wild card. And hey, look, if Houston, I think the reason why Houston is such a quiet 8-4 is because they got blown out by Fort Worth and they got blown out by Canton. Now everybody's gotten blown out by Canton, but I think people remember these two games and they think, I don't know if they're ready, for that next level surge, that next level push. And so they've, people have been kind of putting them in a box, maybe that is deserved or not deserved, but Houston will go out there and prove a point either way. Coming up in the wild card and further into the future if they're able to take care of business at home. The final game of wild card weekend, Sunday, 9 p.m. Eastern. Andy Hamilton, Brandon Walters on the call. That is the Seattle Nemesis and the Baltimore Vultures. This game was a thrashing on a Monday Night Spectacular. It's crazy, Curtis. Three games that we called on Monday night end up being playoff matchups in the wild card round. It's really nuts. But this game will be remembered for a lot of things. It will be remembered for playbook change rules that followed. It will be remembered for an administrative change, players leaving, getting into arguments and having a whole big dust up because that game was just kind of a mess. It was tough to watch. Seattle had no answer for the blitz. And honestly, Curtis, that was Seattle's main problem in that game. They were just trying to sling it down the field 20, 25 yards all night. And that was just not going to work against the Vultures. Seattle seemed a little bit one-dimensional that night. It was just a bad game for the Nemesis. The question is going to be, just like you said with some of the other matchups, Curtis, is what adjustments does Seattle make? Because I think Baltimore probably right now is feeling pretty okay, right? They took care of Seattle. They've been playing better football the second half of the season. This is their time, the playoffs. They always win in the playoffs. They always go on a run late in the season. So Baltimore's got to be feeling pretty confident. How is Seattle going to counter that?
Variety is the spice of life. You called it right at the top there. You said that, down the field, 20, 25 yards, every time that they were in a key moment, they have to be able to control their possessions, get first downs, multiple first downs on drives, control the field of play in front of you rather than just go for the quick strikes, because Baltimore is going to eat you up if you continue to do that time after time after time. Seattle's in a position where they have to play the Baltimore game. Control the line of scrimmage, control the offensive line or the defensive line of Baltimore, and work your blocking schemes to make sure that they don't have nearly the same impact that they had in their earlier matchups. If you're Baltimore, though, you play it the way that your strength dictates. You have a physical run game. You have, with T-Roy Gaines and sometimes even Warren Murray gets into the physical side, you have one of the best quarterback wide receiver combinations in the league with Ivory Irvin. And then you have the ability for them to really take a stranglehold on field position. If Baltimore can pin you within your own 10-yard line and make you one-dimensional, then they will feast all night long and do what Vultures do. Seattle has to do a lot. It's a big ask of them as a young team to come into Baltimore into a more experienced place, but the keys for them are to speed up the game, but also slow it down when it needs to, rather than just try to play it a million miles an hour.
Yeah, the key is pace, scoring and driving with purpose, and getting Baltimore, down and having to rely a little bit more on the passing game. They can do it, no doubt about it, but I think Seattle, it's not the best matchup in the interior, right? Baltimore's full of power. Seattle's a little bit more shifty, and so that doesn't really favor them. If they get in a game where they're trailing Baltimore and Baltimore's kind of dictating pace with their running game, that's not where Seattle wants to be. Trailing, trying to throw, trying to stop that pass rush, trying to stop those linebackers. That's not where they want to be. So it's going to be interesting to see what they do with that. But that is your wild card weekend. Alamo City, Fort Worth, Tulsa, Vancouver Saturday, Atlanta, Houston, Seattle, Baltimore on Sunday. Can't wait to hear all of our playoff crews, particularly Cameron and Rochelle. They've had some really fun calls throughout the season, and they've sort of built a bond behind the scenes, Curtis, and it's going to be cool to see them call a playoff game together, so that'll be a lot of fun. But that is that is it. 150 games in. We have 11 more to go with the playoffs. All the top quarterfinal teams get a break, and we'll see if any of these wild card teams can stand tall to a dominant top 4 from this season. Any final thoughts on the regular season, Curtis?
There are so many teams with something to prove, and my top 2 of those are Minnesota and DC, proving that they belong in the same conversation as a Canton and as a Florida. Florida has definitely cemented themselves in the conversation with their absolute shellacking of Carolina last night, and you really have to give them the props that they deserve. But Minnesota and DC, they are 2 that are hungry, they are motivated, and they are trying to put themselves into the history books, especially DC, with as long as they've been around and trying to make an impact back in the league after their exit.
For our Monday Night Spectacular crew, at least our SFL This Week crew, this is our final episode of Season 22. Mike Daggs and Gerald Smith may do some more pre-game stuff in each round of the playoffs, but that's totally up to them. No pressure from the league. But those guys love what they do, and certainly looking forward to seeing more out of them. But for the SFL This Week crew, that's all she wrote as we head into the playoffs and we get ready for these big-time matchups. What a great regular season to everyone that didn't make it this regular season. Keep your head up. All of us lose at some point every day. So don't get down, and keep the optimism, keep the hope as you rebuild and have a rebirth. And guess what? We don't have to wait very long, because in just a few short months, we'll be down in League City, Texas, kicking off another season. Everyone will be 0-0. The slate will be wiped clean, and we all will have a chance at victory. All right. I think that's it. What do you think?
Yeah. All right. That sounds about right to me.
I think that's it.
Keep the dream alive.
Ron Haynes, thanks for all that you did all season long with Haynes Vision, man. You were awesome. Sorry we didn't get a chance to air some Carolina, Florida stuff, as we had to postpone the show. I had a meeting out of the office that ran late, and there was nothing I could do about it. But he's been awesome all season long. Can't wait to see get further enhancements to his Haynes Vision throughout the playoffs, and for everyone out there that's contributed to the SFL all season long. For Chris Curtis, I'm Cameron Irvine. This has been SFL This Week. Good night, everybody.